Daniel and the lions, it's a story for everybody. You know that, don't you? We learn it from little kids, you know, it speaks to the Nunda ones. They love the story. And we don't, you know, we just go growl. And the kids go, oh, wouldn't it be fun to be in the lion's den, snuggling up with them? And they get some of the lessons of Daniel there. And then the 5 to 8s, it gets a little bit cooler. And it's, you know, I didn't know lions had hairstyles like that, but we loved it at that age. And you get to the teenage years, it becomes a little bit more sophisticated. And then, of course, for the adults, it's very formal and there's no laughing. And I hate being an adult. But the time frame, so it's an incredible story. Everybody knows Daniel and the lion's den. And I guess in your groups today, you're all amazed at how... Look, Christ didn't get crucified by envious men, denied by the rulers, who found no fault, and he put in a tomb with a seal on it, and then come out 3 days later, and then after that, Daniel 6 was written. That's what's amazing about this. Christ didn't even happen. How many years before the Lord? It's like 400 years before the Lord, or 500 years. And this is written. And it has all the hallmarks of Christ's crucifixion. This is Daniel, crucified in Babylon, high and lifted up so his people can be saved from their sins. This is such an amazing chapter. I hope you really see it like that. So the time frame is there. It's about 2 years before the decree of Cyrus. And as we know, Daniel gets to see or witness the decree of Cyrus. What was the decree of Cyrus, by the way? What was the decree of Cyrus?
Go home and build the temple.
Yeah, go home. All right, Jews, you can go home. What an exciting time. Did you know, no nation, this is what I love, no nation in the history of the world has ever lost its nationality, lost its political system. In the case of the Jews, you know, from AD 70, lost their language and never regained their land and their nationality again. It's never happened. But it's happened to the Jews twice, like 2 occasions. It's absolutely unique in the history of mankind. It's just incredible. Now, in case you were thinking also that Daniel's life, although it was difficult, in some respects for you, was somehow easy because he used to see angels every other day of the week, and he couldn't hardly offer a prayer from week to week or month to month without some form of angelic visitation. It wasn't quite like that. I don't know if you know this. This is the chapters in chronological order there. And just think about it. At the beginning of the week, how old was Daniel? I mean, at the beginning of the week, do you know I was 45 at the beginning of this week? And it feels like it's been a whole year. I'm 46 now. It's funny how the time passes. Daniel at the beginning of the week was 17. On Friday, he's now almost 80. This is Daniel. So we have to picture in our minds, look at that massive space of time. And so when he was 20 and he decided, when he was around 17 and he decided, I'm not going to drink the wine, there wasn't an angel whispering in his ear, don't drink the wine, Daniel. It's bad for you. He decided he would make a consistent stand for the truth at that time. And you get to chapter 2, it's 3 years later. And he prays to God, and the dream was revealed to him. So he probably saw an angel, heard an angel speaking to him. And we go, wow, wouldn't it be good to talk to an angel? And it would be. But then look at this. Chapter 3 is 18 years later, and Daniel's not even there. And those men who went into the fiery furnace, they didn't see an angel saying, it's all right, guys, come with me, I'll look after you. They had to go into the furnace before the angel appeared to them. And Daniel didn't even see that. I'm sure when he got back, maybe if he was at Jerusalem, got back, and he had the recount of the story told to him, he would have been excited by it. But it wasn't his visitation. He didn't see that angel. And he would have talked to them and said, oh, what was it like? And who was it? Was it Gabriel? Was it Gabriel that appeared to him in chapter 2 and gave him the details of the dream? Because it's Gabriel all the other times. So he's 38. You get to chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar has his dream. Daniel gives the interpretation, but there's no recording of anybody speaking to him. And it's not until he's 70 years, it's another 30 years further on. And he's praying 3 times a day. And God doesn't even appear to him and say, well done, Daniel. I'll be back in 30 years' time. Doesn't even say anything like that. So in case we're wondering or thinking that all these faithful men in the Bible were bumping into angelic beings all the time, it's not the case. They had to have their faith like you and I have their faith, and they deserve angelic visitation because their job and their responsibility in terms of the nation is so much more important than ours will ever be, although they stand as a model for us to order our lives after. And then it goes on, you can see it there. But Daniel, what's the difference? So I'm going to walk over here. And this is, what day do we start again? Okay, this is Saturday. I always get mixed up when I'm in another country. This is Saturday. And I'm 17-year-old Daniel. And I'm going to walk, I think I mentioned this to you, all the way over here. And it's Friday now. So it's been almost 7 days. And now I'm 86 or thereabouts. What's the difference between Daniel at that end of the stage and Daniel at this end of the stage when it was Saturday and now it's Friday? What's the difference in him? Did you say something then, Kate? Did you whisper something to this person beside you and didn't want anyone else to hear?
I said he's older.
That's it? That's fantastic. Now, have you got anything? Would you like something?
Oh, I do have a flaw.
Oh, well, stop trying to get something else then. Oh, that's excellent. He's older. He's got a few wrinkles. That's all he's got. So I like the phrase like, Daniel has just been Daniel. Because we want to take for ourselves a lesson that when we go home, we're going to try to be like, dare to be a Daniel. But it doesn't mean we go home and, like we've already said, we search for something we can find an objection to, and we come across a little bit self-righteous or a little bit holier than thou. Daniel was just being Daniel. He banked up all these years of consistency, and you can do the same. You go home and you start to be positive about the truth. You start to stand up for what you believe. And I don't mean finding a point of contrast with the people you work with. Start being nice. Don't whinge about the boss. Don't complain about your job or your wage. Get to work on time. Be happy. When people ask you what you do on the weekend, be honest. Don't complain about home life. Be a genuinely good person. Present Christ to them. Start putting that into their emotional bank account and building up that type of stock. And then after a year or two, people will start saying, well, that's just Canaan being Canaan. All right? Or that's just Connor. He's always like that. Is he on something? He's always happy. That's just him. So you start attracting people because of your consistency. This is what Daniel means to me. Don't go home and be obnoxious and be self-righteous. Time will come. If you're consistent, you may have to push back and say no. But don't go home and just say no for the sake of being, you think that's a Daniel. It's not a Daniel at all. It's really, really important. So we look at this story. It's got the threads of a great narrative. Like, it's a huge story. There's so much. There's envy. There's faithfulness. There's betrayal. There's all these concocted charges. They try and aim at Daniel to get him put to death, of course. And Daniel is the captain of Israel's salvation in this story. So first of all, and who was the young one that got up today? The young person that was talking about who Darius was. That was good, because that's what you basically said to there today. And there's a lot of argument about who it is. And if you ask me to put my hat on it, I don't know which one it is myself. I like to think that it could have been maybe Cyrus, but I'm not sure. It makes me laugh when at the end of all of these pieces of evidence, they're not sure who Darius is. It could just be this guy called Darius that nobody has found an historical piece of evidence for. So I'm not exactly sure who the Darius is. Because sometimes, see at the end of chapter 6, where it says, so this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Some render that, believing Darius and Cyrus are the same, that it says it's rendered like this: so Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius, even the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So I'm not going to be dogmatic about that. I just want, for the technical ones amongst you, there's something to chew over and to work out who you might think it is. Now, here, this man, Darius, he's a wise administrator because he knows he needs to divide the power. He can't do it all himself. He needs to delegate. Now, my favourite word is delegate. I love that. That's why I had 6 kids, so I didn't have to do anything as I grew older, except they haven't cottoned on yet what the word means. But it pleased Darius to set over his kingdom 120 satraps, little provincial rulers, to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was one of them. So he is in, there's the king at the top, and then there's 3, and there's 120, and they all administered the kingdom. And he thought, he wanted, it says, where does it say that? The king planned to set him over the whole kingdom so that the king could take, this is how much he trusted Daniel, the king could take a step sideways and let Daniel, like Joseph, this is so amazing, like Joseph, rule the kingdom. And as Pharaoh said to Joseph, only in the throne will I be higher than you. And he let it all go to Joseph. This man planned, and we know that's what would have happened at the end of this whole story. After those who maliciously accused him were thrown into the lion's den, Daniel would have been the head of the nation. Now you just think about how amazing that position would be. He's a Jew in a nation who nationally are prejudiced against the Jews. And it's a Jew who gets to be at the head of it. And only in the throne would Darius have been higher. And it says there that then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other presidents and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. He's so consistent. It's like, when somebody does something for you out of character and you shake your head and you go, oh, wow, that was nice of them. So unlike them, though. And you know that one hot day doesn't make a summer. You've got to have a bank of... Was that funny, was that? I'm going to write that one down because I didn't know you got to laugh. That's excellent. Oh, something's cracked me up too. That didn't, though. Now, so... where were we up to? That's right, it's consistency. That's what it's about. Yeah, just put that in your notes. It's probably a good point. Now, when it says Daniel became distinguished, does anybody know what that word means? Daniel became distinguished. This is excellent, young people. Distinguished. What does it mean? Of course he stood out, but it goes back to the root word, the word that it's based on. Guess what it means? No. It means, are you ready for this? This is so good. It means to glitter from afar. Now that's a strange word. What glitters? Have you guys ever heard of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star? Like stars glitter. And he stood out. Daniel stood out, distinguished like a star in the heavens. And the funny thing about stars is, what's the time period got to be to see a star? When do you see stars? It's only when it's night. It's dark. It has to be dark. Winston Churchill said, only when it's dark can you see the stars. And so we live in a world at the moment, that's what we should be like. We should be distinguished. We should stand out from amongst the other people. Because we're gracious and merciful, and we're long-suffering, and we're becoming, and we're happy, and we're genuine, and we're honest. All those things, that should make us stand out. This is what made Daniel stand out. And it's interesting. Does anybody know where else stars are mentioned in the book of Daniel? Because it's so much like Daniel. You think, if I was going to think of a metaphor that I could represent Daniel by, you could go no further than a star. A bright, he was the glimmer man in Babylon, glittering and shining, and you couldn't miss him. And it makes me think, what would I have liked to be around Daniel? He wasn't one of those glittering people whose righteousness is that real smarmy, smug righteousness. He's the sort of person who I would look up to and I'd want to emulate. I'd want to be like him. Can you think of where the star is in Daniel? Let's go to 12, chapter 12. This is the type of star we're talking about here. You know, in the time of the kingdom, in verse, say, 2, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. This is what Daniel's all about the kingdom of God, and some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise, like Daniel, shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever and ever. That is beautiful. You want to link that with chapter 6 and that verse where Daniel's distinguished. This is what Daniel's like. He turned many to righteousness. If you got your name written in the Bible, that would be amazing. But imagine having your name written in a biblical book while you were still alive. That was Ezekiel. We're not going to go back there, but Ezekiel 14:14. Daniel saved people by his own righteousness. He was a righteous, didn't mean he was perfect. But he meant he was a person you would look to, and he never had anything wrong with him. He wasn't corrupt. There's nothing dodgy about him. And you were a better person just for hanging out with him. You think about this as an application to yourself. Do you glitter? Do you shine? Are people better because they spend time with you? Do I make people better when they're with me? Or are they worse off for it? Do people think, oh no, here he comes again? You know, just once I wish people would call me sir without adding, you're making a scene. Is that what we're like? You didn't even laugh at that. And you have to ask yourself this, because if Daniel's going to mean anything to us young people, surely it means I've got to become a better person. People are going to be better because they're hanging around me. In fact, if they're closer to me, they should be closer to the kingdom. Daniel's going to get to the kingdom. Christ is going to say to him, look at all these hundreds of people. There's probably thousands of people, Daniel, that are in the kingdom just because of you. Man, if one person could be there. I mean, I want to get there myself, but if one person, Christ could tap me on the shoulder and say, look, that person there looked up to you. Maybe one of my family members, for goodness sakes, surely that would happen. That's what it means to glitter. In fact, if I'm honest, you know how the wise men followed the star? I think this is integral to that. So that Daniel talks to them about the 490 years, the 70-week prophecy, and these men who were astronomers, they look up and they're watching for something in the heavens, a star, and it reminds them of Daniel, and they're ready to find the star. And they go to the person, the king of the Jews, who is the brightest star in God's firmament. He's the one that glitters, and all people notice him. All of us are drawn to the Lord Jesus Christ. 400 years later. It's such a beautiful metaphor, the idea of a star. Draw a picture of a star. Have it with Daniel's name written on it. Put your name in small print underneath. Maybe you can reflect some of that glory. Put it on the fridge, like I keep saying. Put it on your study wall. And remind yourself, that's what I've got to glitter like. And shine like that star. People have got to be better because they spend time with you. That's the sort of thing Daniel means to me. Now, why do they object to Daniel, these men? I mean, they can't stand him. I mean, simply because he's right. And so, why do they hate him? Why do they object him? Well, first of all, because they're racist, obviously, but they envied his success. They didn't want a Jew being above them. And this is what the king planned. You know, I'm thinking of making somebody like in my place over all the kingdom. And I've earmarked Daniel for it. They would have hated this. Of course, their own ambitions. And because they were corrupt themselves and this type of elevated position, it becomes very easy to be corrupt and be able to just skim a little bit off the top for yourself. I had a mate actually who he was in a government, he played a part as a government official where they would buy up land for highways and so forth on behalf of the government. And you had to be scrupulous. If a property, like the property owners which had to give up some of their property to make the highway go through, they would say like their $500,000 property was worth $2 million, of course, and they'd have to have property evaluators come in and say, no, it's only worth 500, but we'll sweeten the deal, we'll give you 700 for this area. And that's how it went. But these guys who worked with this brother in the same office, they were so corrupt, and they were always doing dodgy deals with their mates and with people, and they would inflate prices. So something was $1 million worth, they would say it's worth 1.5, and they'd give government money for that, and then they'd go and sell the thing, and they'd split the money. And on a Friday afternoon, they often did this, tried to rush things by his desk to get him to sign off, and they would swear at him, curse, just do it, and he would never do it. Even for to expedite things and just to settle things down in the office. He was scrupulous, and he was honest, and he had integrity. These men had none of that. And a person like Daniel in the office, they couldn't skim things off the top very easily. He wouldn't have a bar of that. He was too good. In fact, he's so good. Like where have we heard this before? This is how good he was. The king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the presidents and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they couldn't find any ground for complaint or any fault because he was faithful, no error or fault. Who's that? So Daniel's more, it's almost like that Daniel is out of the picture. This is Christ all through this chapter. That's how much Daniel is like Christ. I find no fault in him. It's incredible. So they've had to find now fault with him in terms of his relationship with his religion. And so after, like the slide we had up earlier, how long's Daniel been in office for as a politician? How do you think about your politicians? Oh my goodness. Australian politicians any different? No. But how corrupt are they? How many times, I mean, you've got 70 odd years in politics. And these are the sort of fellas who would go through your whole life and every Twitter account you had with a fine-tooth comb, looking for any molehill they can make this mountain out of. And how many times had Daniel been up to Shushan or some king's business holiday, not holiday but travel, and he handed all his receipts in, and he hadn't claimed anything that he shouldn't have, and they could find absolutely nothing after 70 years. In a politician's life, that would be unheard of. You can hardly look at the man, he's that good. And of course, none of us are like that. But we want to be a little bit more like that. This is that Daniel. It's verging on, and we should just turn here to have a look. You probably looked at it today. It's in 2 Peter, 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 2. Some of you, I think, would have turned this up this morning. This is what Daniel went through. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse, say 11, just a little section. Beloved, I urge you, as sojourners and exiles, to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Right? Live lives of propriety. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honourable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, as they did with Daniel, Daniel, you're an evildoer, they can't find anything wrong with him. They're just going to make false accusations. They may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of visitation. One day they're going to have to admit it. Now, did any of you look at Peter and the themes of Peter reflecting on and drawing from the times of Daniel? Did any of the groups look at that? Yeah? Because, I mean, by no means is this exhaustive, and we're not going to go through it, but there's so much in Peter's epistles. And where did Peter say he wrote from? But where did he really write from? He wrote from Rome. He wrote from Rome. But he wrote to people who were in exile. They couldn't live back in their own country anymore. And can I ask you, why do you think Peter drew on all the examples and the themes in the book of Daniel and littered those through his epistles to exiles? Why do you think he would have done that? Collectively, they could all look back to the time of Daniel and feel in themselves, if Daniel did it and he was faithful and God was with him, then we can also do it and go through it as well. And this is what I love about the Bible. This is why types are there. So who did Daniel look back to? He looked back to Joseph and found strength in that. And so we get to the time of Christ. Do you think snarling, vicious men coming to the king? Of course, they put on their nice faces first because they wanted to appeal to his pride about, you know, oh king, wouldn't it be wonderful for 30 days if we made you more godlike than what you already are? But these are the same men as in verse 11, same word, same Chaldean word in verse 11 where it says, then these men came by agreement. What's the AV say for that? Assemble. Okay, so that's the word. Is that what I've got up there? Yeah, typical. So they assembled tumultuously. And they found Daniel, obviously, making petitions and pleading before his God. And you can imagine them at the time. Ha ha, caught you, Daniel. Oh, you're not going to get that promotion anymore, are you? No, just kidding. We're going to have you put to death. Like, this is what they're like. This is this tumult. What do you think it relates? And look at verse 15. And then these men came by agreement to the king. After the king had signed the stupid law of the Medes and Persians, which can't be undone. And they said to the king, oh, no, O king, that it's a law of the Medes and Persians. Can you hear the tumult that surrounded Christ? And they were begging for his blood, saying, crucify him, when they said, we have a law, and by our law he ought to die. Can you see that in these words? It's pretty obvious, isn't it? This is these type of people. Now, why didn't they just have some assassin come and kill him? Surely they could have got, you know, an elite ninja in that time just to take Daniel out. Why didn't they do that? There were knives around every corner.
Put it on display.
Yeah, what would be the hope of putting it on display?
To put fear in the other followers.
Yeah. And what did they want to have him killed as, though? What did they want Christ crucified for? Why did it have to be crucifixion? That's right. As a blasphemy, as a criminal. They're going to have him put to death at the hands of the king as a criminal. He's no good. He doesn't glitter. Look at him, down in a hole with the lions. There's nothing good about that. They wanted to condemn him as a criminal who broke the law, not dying as a martyr. They wanted to stop his legacy and his reputation here in its tracks. Now, okay, so the king gets conned into doing this for 30 days, and the king thinks, oh, well, how flattering. That's just wonderful. Yeah, I could do that. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be godlike? And, of course, he signs it, and they catch him out. How many prayers would Daniel have offered in 30 days if he had have stopped praying? 90 prayers. Now, it's getting to the end of the 70 years, and Daniel must obviously be desperate in prayer, praying for forgiveness, wanting to go back. He knows they're going to go back. He understands the time frame now. He's not happy with it, that it's 1260 years and God's going to do the same thing back to the temple once more. But he must be desperate in this prayer. I'm not sure that chapter 9... Well, I don't think chapter 9 is the prayer that he offers, for one thing, but I'm not sure that chapter 9's prayer has been offered by Daniel, which means Gabriel hasn't come to Daniel and said, Daniel, the reason why I'm going to raise the temple to the ground is because your own people are responsible for Messiah's death. I don't think that's happened. So Daniel's prayers would have been desperate. At the end of these 70 years, he's obviously praying for the forgiveness of sins. And praying for it. He opens his windows up, he kneels, and he's facing Jerusalem. That's what it's all about, the holy hill, the sanctuary, the people. These are desperate prayers. Do you think Daniel thinks at this time in Israel's political history or national history that there's any luxurious room to miss 90 prayers? Like, when you ask yourself, why pray? There's no way. I'll just put them all up, and we'll just talk about them. He couldn't miss 90 prayers. And anyway, as we said, he's been doing it since he was 17. if he dies because of the king's edict, who cares? He's not changing now. It's just Daniel being Daniel. You're not going to stop it. And you might argue and say, yes, but Daniel, the whole national life of Israel depends on you. You can't just throw your life away like that. Close your shutters. Don't let them see you. But he had to be an example. And you can imagine Daniel in his house. And I always like the terms of Christ's crucifixion, high and lifted up. And people's eyes would have been lifted up to Daniel, looking out of their houses, petrified. You know, no, kids, we're not saying our prayers tonight. And the little kid says, but Daniel did it? Imagine that. It's because of the righteous man Daniel that the whole nation are uplifted and they're looking towards him as their saviour. Will he do it? He did it. He never stopped. And he knows they're there. He knows they're watching them. He doesn't care. It's absolutely incredible. What an example he is. He's their captain. He's their leader. And people would have followed him. Just the same as the Lord Jesus Christ. Obviously, it was a habit, not a bad habit, not a vain habit, but it was a habit of prayer. We don't always feel like praying, do we? If I said, your hands up, who sometimes goes to bed without saying their prayers? You know? I mean, to my shame. How do we do that? And yet we do. So you don't always feel like praying, but you should pray. It's good to pray. And the habit of prayer, the mechanical consistency of doing prayers gets you through those times where you don't always feel like it. Because you cannot afford to be run by your feelings, young people. Oh, when I feel like going to the meeting, I feel like going to Bible, I don't feel like it tonight, I'll just stay home. You've got to do it because it's right. You've got to do it because it's a good thing to do. You've got to set that alarm on your phone. PT time, prayer time, 3 times a day, something that's convenient for you, something that will remind you. Man, when I even did that on my phone, had the alarm, I still didn't pray 3 times a day. That's how hopeless I am. Even with a time to pray. Oh yeah, what? I'll forget about it and keep going. We need that all the time. And this is what Daniel was like to me. He was an example and he did it through habit. I could tell you a funny story, but I won't. About habit. So repetition is good as long as it's not vain. Now, how is it the safest option possible to pray? Why would that be the safest option? Because he's going to get put to death. Why do you think that would be a reason? It's the safest option. Seth? Okay, get in, you can answer. Yes. He's putting his trust in God. True, but if he didn't pray for Daniel, what would that be, Seth?
The punishment of man versus the punishment of God.
It's simple. What would you rather fall into? The furnace of God, the furnace of man, into the hands of the living God? Like, we shouldn't fear him who has power over our mortal bodies. We should fear him who, after our mortal bodies have turned back to dust, have power over our eternity, over our souls. That's who we obey. And the safest option possible is to stand on God's side. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And he has power over our eternal life, He was on Daniel's side, no matter what. And we get upset because we go, yeah, but, they made laws against the Jews. They make laws against the ecclesia. I remember Brother Tim Galbraith was telling this funny story about the Indian brethren who were complaining that the Indian government just keep making laws that benefited the Muslims and the Islamic religion in India. And they never made any laws that helped the ecclesia, helped the Christadelphians there. They always ignored them. And they complained, they said, it's not fair. It's not fair. They always make the laws to help them and not us. And I remember Brother Tim saying, no, that's not the way it is at all. We have God on our side. God's on our side. He said, I feel sorry for the Muslims. They only have the Indian government on their side. I mean, what a way of looking at it. It's incredible, isn't it? And sometimes we feel like that too. Everyone's against us. Hold on. Matt, you've got God on your side. Yeah, but things keep going wrong. But God's on your side. Yeah, but I got a flat tire. People don't like me, and I'll get overlooked for promotion, and God's on your side. You know, probably make that another thing, under the star. God is on your side. It's on your side. And put in capital letters. Your side. Put on your fridge. Put on your... You got to put things around you in your life to remind you of these things, because after TYC you're going to forget. We get all excited about these things, then we go home and we forget. So why should he stand firm? Obviously. They all stood firm in chapter 1. It set up the whole of their existence in Babylon, and it kept going. He was bold. Then Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego stood firm. They were bold. Daniel was faithful to Nebuchadnezzar, and he told him the truth. He didn't gild the lily like the wise men might have wanted to. Oh, Lord, King, this is all about the tree. Cut it down. You have dominion over all the earth. That would be the temptation. Daniel's told him like it was. And Daniel was definitely defiant to Belshazzar. Absolutely. Now, the poor king, when he gets caught, he's angry at himself, but he's also angry at these men. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And they come to him and they say, oh, well, Daniel, the one from Judah, from the exiles in verse 13, he doesn't pay any attention to you. Remember they said that to Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 3? These men pay no attention to you. They won't worship your gods. They're not going to fall down to the image that you set up. They're ignoring you. The king's not angry at Daniel. He's angry at himself and he's angry at them because he's been caught and he knows it through his own pride. And when the king heard these words, he was much distressed. And he set his mind to deliver Daniel. He probably argued with the men, like, come on, it doesn't have to be that bad. And they say, oh, but O king, we wish we could help you, great monarch. Your law can't be changed. King commands Daniel to be brought in, and they throw him into the den of lions. And the lions' mouths are stopped. Have you ever seen the den like that? I like seeing a great big ravine area, and probably had some wall around it, and where they rolled the stone across, and it was so that to get in, they weren't just dropping them into, a hole in the ground. But it's something interesting anyway, where these ravenous lions roamed around, and they were obviously hungry. The king knows how hungry they are, because that night he didn't even sleep a wink. He's all anxious and upset. What do you think Daniel's doing? I mean, you can paint it nicely. I'm sure Daniel would have been concerned about being put into the lion's den, but after 5 minutes and they ignored him and their mouths were stopped. Maybe they were growling at him, I don't know. Maybe he went around and poked each of them, found out which one was the softest one, and then lay down and went to sleep. Maybe he slept well, the aged prophet. I'm not sure, but he's in there and he's faithful. And the next day, at the break of day, early in the morning, like the women that went to the tomb, so much like Christ in this. The king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. He comes near to the den where Daniel was in verse 20, and he cries out in a tone of anguish. The king declares, Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm. Now, what's interesting about verses 21 and 22? Does anybody know? I'm sure you would have brought it up in your groups today. What is utterly, this is probably for me the most staggering part of this chapter, in verses 21 and 23. What is it? And while you're thinking of that, if you wanted to take notes about lines in relation to the Lord Jesus Christ, you've got Psalm 22, verse 13. Psalm 57, verses 4 to 6. Psalm 91, verse 13. Psalm 124, verse 6. And the miracle here is underlined, because when these men get thrown in, when Daniel's been brought out and the other men get thrown in, they don't even get to the bottom of the den or the ravine or wherever the lions are. They catch them before they hit the ground like a dog catches a bone. That's how ravenous they are. Now, what's interesting about verses 21 to 22. What's the most amazing thing about this chapter?
It's the first time Daniel speaks.
That's it, Matt. It's the first time Daniel speaks. Which means what? In front of these animals, these ravenous lions, he was led like a lamb to the slaughter. That's what it means. He's silent before his accusers. That little, just that unseen, unspoken, just that little textual fact is utterly amazing. And if you ask me, I would say, yes, the Lord got great comfort from that. When he, like rising up in him, he wanted to answer Herod, Caiaphas, and he was silent. He must have thought of Daniel. When people were accusing him, standing all around, it's just, honestly, I mean, how long does it take for you to open your mouth to stand up for yourself when somebody accuses you of doing something wrong, particularly in front of others? How long? Hey, no, I'm not having that. Daniel's silent. What a man. It says no harm came to him. No harm. Where have we read those words before? No harm. Isn't that chapter 3? They come out of the fire and there was no smell of smoke and no harm. I mean, Daniel 3 and 6 are so similar. It's incredible. This is Daniel's fiery furnace of a like, and their fiery furnace was like Daniel's lion's den. Exactly the same form in the story. And here's something even, I think, amazing, because we want to transfer the lesson to Daniel to ourselves, and we go, yeah, but I don't think I'll ever get thrown into a lion's den. When it says in verse 24 that these men had maliciously accused Daniel, we know what that word means. What does it mean? What does it mean where it says these men who had maliciously accused Daniel? Has anybody looked up that word? That's going to be worth a pen, that one. This is my final genuine Australian souvenir pen. This is quality. You can have hours of writing enjoyment with this. Verse 24, where it says they accused Daniel, what does that word mean? You'll never guess. If you don't know it, be prepared to have your mind blown. Yes, have you had any of these? Okay, just at school I get up, you know, oh, you could hurt somebody. Okay, we're going to risk it. Oh, that was bad. So that's why don't throw anything. That was rubbish, as Rachel would say. Now, so what does it mean to devour? It means to devour and chew up the morsels. So who are the lions here? Obviously these men. So if we want to transfer the lessons of Daniel to our own life, it's easy. We have people in our lives who are like lions, like it's in 1 Peter, who devour our faith, who are ready to try and take us away, who chew at us, who devour at us, who are ravening, just hate us. By their words, they're malicious. It's not furnaces that we face, but it's the hatred and the hot anger of people that despise our very existence just because we have a different opinion. It's not wine that we have to say no to. No one's going to say, drink it! Drink it! Right? It's not going to happen to us. I'd say yes. It's the immoral world seducing us. Sin all the time. Every time I do something, I've drunk Babylon's wine, where it's wrong. It's not vessels that are stolen, but it's us, filled up by sin. We've got to make our vessels clean and holy so they can be of use in God's house to serve God. And it's not beasts that we ever encounter in a literal sense, obviously. Those nations who hate God, they lie about him and they persecute his people because they speak out viciously against us. That's what it is to take Daniel's lessons to ourselves. These men here were ravening predators, and their mouths were, in the words of Peter, The mouths were stopped. It's such an incredible thing. Actually, have a look at Titus. We'll finish with Titus. Titus chapter 1. This is like those men who confronted Daniel. These are evil beasts, for there are many in verse 10 of Titus chapter 1. There are many who are insubordinate, empty talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision party. Their mouths must be stopped. They must be silenced, since they are upsetting whole families by teaching for shameful gain. Same motivation as these men, and they ought not to teach. That's what it's like. You've got to silence them. And we silence them by our way of life and by our honesty and by our integrity. And here's some of the things that Daniel went through. So things change from Saturday to Friday. Things change from Daniel chapter 1 to Daniel chapter 6. 70 years goes under the bridge. Kings have come and gone. Times have been hard. Times haven't always been exciting like TYC. Life in the truth is so-so sometimes. Life in the truth is just cruising sometimes, just boring. Daniel had those times as well, but he tried to remain consistent. He was responsible through them. Daniel stayed the same. Daniel was just being Daniel. He was a servant, he was an example, he was a saviour, a deliverer, and he certainly was a righteous man. I love Daniel. I love the book of Daniel. Years ago I thought it was just about the prophecy. Had no idea this man shone so brightly in these chapters. I hope this week, I'm sure we have. I mean, I've sat down with you guys in your study groups. You guys have been fantastic.